In this session, we're going to talk to Sister Josephine Garrett. Sister Josephine is a sister of the Holy Family of Nazareth. Now, she's a native Texan, born and raised in Houston. She moved to Dallas in '99 to begin studies at the University of Dallas. And then she went into business and banking. And for 10 years, she served as the vice president of home loans divisions of the Bank of America. She had a staff of 200 people and later as a project manager, moving on up in that. But then, being raised Baptist, she had a call to the Catholic Church in 2005. And then in 2011, she began her formation as a religious sister. In November of 2020, she professed her final vows as a sister of the Holy Family of Nazareth. She's now a licensed counselor, and she serves as a school counselor for the Cathedral Grade School in Tyler, Texas. And she also has a private practice. Now, Sister's been in high demand lately for talks and for retreats, speaking to groups of up to 25,000. And so Sister Josephine Garrett is my guest today. I was blessed to know Sister Josephine before she entered the religious life and have watched her grow as a Catholic disciple. And it's my pleasure to welcome her today. It's good to have Sister Josephine Garrett here with us. And Sister Josephine, for those of you who may not be familiar with your work, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a sister of the Holy Family of Nazareth and just made my final vows in November of 2020. So got all the full-fledged now. So I, former Baptist, former person who worked in the banking industry, but after becoming a sister, the sisters were wonderful, gave me the opportunity to discern God's call to serve in ministry according to our charism, and what came up there was to be a counselor. So now I'm a licensed counselor working in Tyler, Texas. Spend time in our school. We have a Cathedral Grade School here, and I'm their school counselor. And then I also serve in a private practice where I'll see teenagers and adults.
Yeah, there are not a lot of people who could probably say, I went from Baptist banker to Catholic religious sister in mental health. I don't know of anybody else that can say that. Do you know anybody else that's got that a similar story, sister?
I haven't met them yet, but I did hear about some sisters who worked for Bank of America and they worked from convent, but I haven't heard them yet. Yeah, but I had a really good, when I was discerning, I sat down with a woman who worked in the counseling department at our university, the university in Philadelphia, and I was a little freaked out. I was telling her, I'm thinking that I want to do this instead of, teach theology was what I've been thinking of. And she was so good. She was like, well, let's just sit down and look back over your life at times in your work that were rewarding for you. Because while it may not have had the title of the things you're thinking of, it could be the stuff to help you see your gifts, And so when we sat down and kind of floated back on the most rewarding times for me at the bank, they were using skills that are actually more indicative of a counselor type of ministry versus a teaching. Yeah. And without her help, I wouldn't have seen that. So,
yeah. Yeah. It's to me, and we were talking about this before I hit the record button, right? To me, mental health has become such a big issue. And one of the things in reflecting upon this, because you're a mental health expert at this point, you're a counselor, right? You've had to go through all this training. You're in practice now. You're working with kids and adults and families and all these people who are suffering from mental health issues. I'm somebody from the outside looking in, and I'm looking at this situation we're in right now with the pandemic, knowing that I keep hearing these stories of the heightened issue of mental health, right? That this impact on mental health is really profound. What are some of the trends and issues for those people like me, a leader in the Catholic Church, somebody that works at a diocese or a school or a parish? What are some of those things that they need to know about, these trendings or issues that are growing right now because of the pandemic and mental health?
I think and one of the things they trained us in school was to just pull our research before we had to look at the dates on our research and how the research was done and things like that. I want to encourage, especially ministry leaders, to not get shy about that. To be careful with your resources. So be mindful of pop psychology type resources. So while Psychology Today has very engaging articles, that would be something we more consider pop psychology. It doesn't undergo a certain amount of rigor before they publish what they publish.
Okay.
But things that come from CDC or the National Institute for Mental Health or journal articles, peer-reviewed scholarly articles, things like that have undergone a certain amount of rigor. We can look at it for data. Those sources won't always align with our faith, but we can check their data to kind of get an idea of the general landscape. And accept that, I think sometimes, especially serving in a Catholic school, one of the bridges I'm trying to help build is that be mindful not to think that because we have the gift of our faith, that we are exempt from some of these struggles.
Yeah.
Like, it hasn't exempted us from participating in the statistics that reflect the general landscape. And so I'll sometimes really have to sit with. So I like this research that I found, and it's, an acceptable date to speak to. And so what you would think and what you've heard is accurate from a research perspective. Anxiety's up, depression's up, but also like symptoms, what we would call like stress-related symptoms. So like symptoms that tend to come with experiences of trauma, right? So we're not saying everyone's traumatized, but like all my little symptoms that fall under that category of stress-related trauma reactions, I have an uptick in those types of symptoms. So stress-related symptoms, depression, anxiety's up, as well as consideration of suicide is up. Most increase occurring in the ages of 18 to 24. And then highest percentages among women, and then highest percentages actually among Hispanics.
So are there any indicators that would tell us why those particular populations are having higher incidence? Like younger people, Hispanic, women, why those populations? Why would they have higher incidences of this?
My speculation with younger people, I mean, this is in general, like our younger generations in my opinion, don't have the level of resilience and like natural coping abilities as some older people do. And some of that is like, how we're parenting our kids, the messages like that, like around that are forming a sense of like, coping and being resilient, as well as like resiliency and coping is a lot about like how my brain is made up. And that's one of the things I'm fascinated with. So I specialize in trauma, and I'm seeking a specialty certification in ADHD. And I was kind of asking myself, like, why would both those things interest me? They're so different. It's because they look a lot at the brain, and I feel fascinated with the brain. So I also think like our brains are less strong than they used to be. Like brains are like muscles. That's how I teach the kids here. I'll teach them like, is your brain like a muscle, or is it always going to be the same? They're like, it's like a muscle. And I'm like, that's right. So we got to take care of it, and strengthen it. I don't think we do a lot of things to strengthen that part of ourselves.
While you're saying that, sister, just a second.
Okay.
Yeah, they're right. And isn't that what happens?
Really, yes. Like blue light creates problems in our brain. And so I think that's why I would say younger. Women in general, like when you look in the DSM, the prevalence of the DSM is like the big book we use that has all the diagnoses in it. For most of the things in there, women have a higher prevalence. So I think that's just remaining consistent. And then with our Hispanic populations, the first place I would look to, and this doesn't do that, I would be curious to see like the relationship between these race ethnicity percentages, if they could cross it somehow with household income. Because again, on here, the highest for anxiety, for depression, for stress related, across the board, the highest report is coming from the lowest income families.
Because they have less access to the resources, correct? So you brought up the DSM. So let's go there. So the DSM, and I'm slightly familiar with it because my wife has a master's in social work. So she had to go through a couple of years of grad school, and they plopped the DSM on the desk and said, okay, here, you're a social worker, right? And we're not going to actually get into the weeds as a social worker, but you need to be at least somewhat familiar with this DSM. And so this thing is updated, what is it, annually, every couple of years?
No, the last big update, I think, was 2013.
Okay.
Over there. So we're on our 5th edition of the DSM.
And I remember when that came out, that last edition, there were some things where they changed from, okay, this is a mental health issue to this is normative, right? And sometimes those things would impact or I should say, be at odds with some of the things we hold as true as Catholics, right? About the human person, about sexuality and things like that. So have you struggled as somebody who's in the mental health field and also, as a Catholic religious sister to say, how do I hold these things in tension? How do you do that?
I mean, for me, it's been like I have not yet, as practicing as a clinician, been faced with like diagnosing something that is contrary to my values. I have had a number of kids show up in session, and say I'm gay or I'm bisexual or I'm a lesbian. I can tell you, for the most part, with my kids who presented to session, and it was always kids. I haven't had adults yet in that situation. With my kids who presented to session, in the majority of the cases, we did education about the nature of attraction. And in the majority of my cases, this leveled off. And so, and by the grace of God, because I remember it was the first time it happened, it was a situation where I was shocked because we had spent a lot of time talking about other things. And it was really by the grace of God that type of intervention to say, let's look at your experience of attraction. Because our textbooks tell us to take them along a path of like developing, take them along a path of like developing in them, like how they may have inherited like dislike of themselves, self-hate, because what the textbooks say is because we live in a heteronormative society. That's how the textbooks would describe it. So our training tells us to take them along this path to make sure the heteronormative society hasn't somehow harmed them and to help them embrace their, non-heteronormative tendencies. And so where I just wanted to start, but the textbooks do actually say to begin with their sense of sexuality, which I thought was healthy for textbooks to say. So I did begin there, but then brought in, what we get from St. John Paul II, Pope St. John Paul II, this idea about the beauty of attraction. And that this person that you're attracted to, it seems like your only framework about attraction that's been provided to you is a sexual one. But that's not true about attraction. Attraction is a much more broader, sacred reality that's communicating something to you about how wonderful you are. And so when I have conversations like that with kids who are coming to me and being like, I'm a lesbian, I've seen a sense of feeling set free. Like feeling set free. They're like, I can just be friends. And I'm like, yeah, you can just be friends because guess what? You're not even old enough to date.
Exactly.
So just be a virtuous friend. So that's what's going on so far with some of those things that you're talking about that have become normative in the DSM when they're presenting in session. So I haven't had to diagnose any real gender dysphoria concerns, things like that yet.
It'll happen though. And as somebody, I consider myself a dabbler in mental health, and part of the reason why is because working in pastoral ministry, you have a lot of people who come and I'm a dabbler in confession because people have confessed every sin in the, I just can't give absolution, right? Same thing. So you do this kind of work long enough, right? You work in the church long enough, you hear all this stuff. And I remember the first time for those of people who are listening, I worked in campus ministry for 15 years. So I worked with young adults for 15 years. And I remember the first time a young person came in and said, I'm looking at pornography and I'm masturbating and I don't know what to stop. Can you help me? I don't know how to stop. Can you help me? And I went, no, I can't. I didn't know what to do. Now I went and taught, I looked for resources. There was nothing out there, sister, at the time. There was nothing out there. This is 20 years ago. So I went to a addictive studies center, which was at the university I was at, which is at Texas Tech. And they have an addictive studies center. And I asked, who's your expert on pornography and sex addiction? And at that time, it was a brand new field. And they were like, okay, there's a guy with a broom closet back there. And I think he knows something. So I went to these professors who actually ended up, they were both LDS. So they were both Mormon and they were studying this stuff. And I started sitting down with them and they said, look, we're actually in the process of trying to help people who are working in churches understand this more so that they can help people, because you're not the first one to come and ask us about this. And we actually put together a training for priests and deacons and lay people in the Catholic Church where we presented it in 2 different dioceses where we started to address this situation. So I ended up spending 15 years working with sex addicts. Now, on a pastoral side of things, right? I can't do the mental health stuff. And the mental health stuff is for mental health professionals. And here's where I wanted to go with this, because this is a longer story, make it longer. I'm supposed to be interviewing Sister Josephine. I'm telling the story. But if you think about this, in our mission of evangelization for the church, right? We're supposed to be making disciples. And you come in contact with somebody who has a mental health issue or behavioral issue or a sex addiction or something else. This is a huge issue in the journey to Jesus, right? First, that initial conversion, but it's also, even if somebody already has Jesus in a relationship with him, has had a conversion, it doesn't mean those things go away. And it can be a huge barrier to growth, right? So how is somebody who's not a mental health, professional, what do you think we need to be aware of? And how do you think we can move forward and help those folks, for somebody who's working pastorally in the church?
So it's the first 2 or 3 things that come to mind for me, serving pastorally and trying not to put the burden on yourself when you're serving in a pastoral capacity to be the counselor. But there are some things right away we can do, which is one, affirm the person in front of you, right? So just be, and that happens, I think, through removing stigma. So just first, talking about the fact that we're all having our various struggles, and for me, especially in a pastoral setting, removing stigma kind of disempowers evil, Satan. because he needs that stigma. Say evil needs that darkness to operate well. And so to remove stigma, to affirm the person for like seeking help, remove the stigma, and in the sense bring about this idea of universality, that like we're all having various types of struggles. Like you're not the only one. Messages like that. Like there are lots of people who struggle with this. There's ministries. There's going to be a way forward for you. So that sense of universality, you are not by yourself, even though it may have seemed this way. Because a lot of times when someone's struggling with a mental health concern, they feel like the only one.
Yeah.
Like no one's like this except me, and I think the devil can really work in that. And so because I'm the only one this bad off, I've got to keep this a secret. All right. And then and there's so much stigma, like people will more readily run to the primary care physician for even just a little sore throat, but be like spending their entire day struggling with symptoms of anxiety and never see a therapist. And that's a sign of stigma. But the other thing I would want to encourage people in pastoral settings is, if God has entrusted you with the gift to serve in a pastoral capacity in the church, that one of the things to steward that well is to attend to like my own mental health care needs. Because countertransference is no joke. It's no joke. And so we call that counselors countertransference is when my stuff starts to become a problem for my client.
Yeah.
And so that's a reality in the pastoral setting as well, where my stuff can start to become a problem for the person I'm serving. And we're never going to be perfect at that. Like our wounds are all day long just running into each other. Our wounds are running into each other and causing all kinds of mess, but we could try to get better at it. And so to give an example of like countertransference in my life, like there are times, where I've sat in sessions and had this session and had to sit there realizing that like, this session is really kicking up my father wound, and got through that session and then had to go get behind a bathroom door and cry and realize that like, I've got to take care of whatever's happening right now for the sake of my client, and so maybe that's to see my spiritual director or see my counselor, or just like kind of like take care of that wherever in my life I need to take care of it. So that's kind of what I would say is, if you're in a pastoral setting, affirm the person for coming to you, acknowledge their courage and bravery and bringing it into the light, try to remove that stigma, create a sense of universality, and then partner with them to find the resources. So like we're going to walk together to see where we can get you, because that can just bring so much relief alone, to not feel like I'm by myself, and then to realize, are there any of my wounds at play here that are hindering me from being able to serve this person well?
Yeah, one of the things I had to learn was my limitations in these areas, what I could and couldn't do. Or should and shouldn't do also. And one of the things I could do and should do is also talk about identity. What role do you think that plays with people in a pastoral setting?
Like my professional identity.
Yeah, I'm talking about like, okay, somebody comes to me and they're struggling with this thing. And as somebody who can help them in a spiritual realm, I can talk about their identity as a son or daughter of God.
Oh, yes. And this is that. Yeah, I think this is that thing that really, those things I was talking about that like would help with stigma, universality, like courageous for bringing it to light. I think at the root of all of that stuff is you're not going to cease to be God's daughter or son. Absolutely. Yeah. That like, because I think we get that idea too, for some reason, especially with mental health concerns, and especially when mental health concerns start to, the symptoms start to send us into sinful patterns, we can feel like we're cut off from that inheritance in a sense, or like we're cut off from that identity. And we're not cut off from the identity. Like we have kind of in sin, we do turn away, but we don't cease to have the identity. Like that doesn't cease to happen. And so, as much as people in pastoral settings can be remembering to encourage people who are brave enough to come forward, but then also just to be putting those messages out there. So if there's someone who is afraid to come forward, that they can be hearing that, and that can maybe give them the courage to come forward.
Yeah. So it seems to me that, if we were to take mental health really seriously as a church, then some things would probably have to change. So if you were to dream big about that, what would it look like for the Catholic Church in the USA to take mental health more seriously?
I don't want to. I have my instinct answer. I don't know. Maybe you can edit it out, Marcel, if you feel like the church ain't ready for it.
I've got the gift of prophecy, and I got to tell you, there are times I get prophetic, and the church is not ready, and I just let her go. It's you're gonna hear it one way or the other.
Okay. The first thing that comes into my mind is a better grip on mental health care and the formation for our priesthood.
Oh yeah.
And so I think that like at this time, like that one hit psyche vow is not cutting it.
Yeah.
And so to really just, when we look at the formation that we provide to these men, and these men, they are God's children, they are sacred and precious. They're entrusting, themselves into the care of the church for formation for the priesthood. And so to really look at more robust solutions to address those mental health care needs and to identify, because there is much superficially in the life of a priest that might appear attractive to people who may be struggling with certain mental health concerns.
Yeah.
So when the life of a priest is looked on superficially, in some sense, it can attract and draw.
Yep.
And so just to really account for that in a robust way beyond this one hit 4 to 8 hours psyche vow. So
I would love that. Oh, by the way, I think if you've ever followed me for any length of time on the interwebs, or know me as a friend, people would say, Marcel thinks he should be rewriting seminary formation. So, and the reason why is because I've worked with priests for, decades now. And some of my best friends are priests, and I have them at my house all the time, and I got like 100 in my phone right now. I can text and say, hey, how you doing? But the reality is that, these are the most important leaders on the ground locally in every single Catholic community. There are our pastors, and we need to be doing them the service of helping them be good pastors, right? And the church needs to make sure that's happening. And because it not only benefits the church, it benefits the men. Yes, remember, there are men, they are men before they are priests. They're human beings before they're priests, which means they need a lot of stuff, just like the rest of us do. And let's just acknowledge that. And that our formation is not perfect right now.
Yes. And so that's the first thing that comes to mind, like for the church on a large scale. But then also for the church on a larger scale, I once was tasked with, it was this beautiful task. I'll never forget it. I was so grateful for them inviting me to do it. But I was tasked with there had been a synod in a diocese, like a diocesan level synod, and they had transcribed every word spoken by every person who came to provide input at the microphone.
Yeah.
And they categorized it all, and they got a team of people to read it all and try to draw out themes. And I got to be one of the people to sit down and read parts that related to youth and young adult ministry. And I'll never forget, one of the emerging themes was, the church is not where I come to know how to feel or think or what to say about the stuff that's happening in my real life. And so they were like, I don't walk through the doors on Sunday to hear anything that's going to help me with those things. And it was a gut punch.
Golly.
It was really a gut punch. And so I think, there are things happening in the lives of families that are more common among families than we maybe accept or realize at this time, that I think we could speak more openly about, and have more open conversations about them and make it sort of a common language. That right now the church, parishes can be pretty silent on these matters. And so, but they impact the mental health of the community. And sometimes my job feels too easy, because sometimes even just to speak about the reality in the room can bring significant healing. I love the intervention of psychoeducation. If I've got a child who has survived sexual abuse, or a young woman who has survived sexual abuse, and I even just educate her about the nature of abuse and the common symptoms after it, the weight that comes off of her shoulders just because someone sat down and spoke to her, you can visibly see it with clients. So just talking about it can be so healing. And so issues like infertility, domestic abuse and violence, abuse in homes, addictions like you're speaking of, the number of men in our churches who may be grappling and struggling with pornography, kids who, and again, the clinical percentage of people who experience same-sex attraction, the clinical percentage is not high. But it feels like a bigger problem because of mainstream media. Not problem, but it's the percentage feels larger because of mainstream media. And then we've got kids who maybe do not have that predominant sexual attraction to the same sex, but because of mainstream media are influenced to act in such a manner or speak in such a manner. And so even speaking into that in an appropriate way.
That's right. Yeah. You can't just tell somebody you're not gay, right? It feels like they are.
Or be do what you want to do, So I guess to your question, if the church moved, I guess I've lost the way you phrased it, but if this became more attended to in the church on a grand scale,
Yeah.
I think it would be that, like, A, the formation of our priests, and B, like some of these things that we kind of keep hush hush, like finding a way to bring them into our conversations, because they are realities in the lives of our family, in our families. And so to be a place where people feel like they are talking about the things that may be going on in my family and are impacting my mental health would be a good start.
So that's kind of big picture, right?
Yes.
So let's get local for a second.
Sure.
Now, I would do, when I worked at Texas A&M and St. Mary's Catholic Center, we had a campus ministry association. And in that campus, we'd get the Baptists, the Lutherans, the Mormons, the Jewish rabbi, we'd all get together as a campus ministry people. And every quarter we would meet with, every 6 months. So twice a year we would meet with the counselors from the counseling center. And we would either talk about issues we saw, or they would do a training with us on different things. So it was everything from okay, they did one on sleep deprivation and why we need to encourage our students to get more sleep and hear the impacts of sleep, all this other stuff. I remember a lot of these training, great conversations, great information exchange. But one of the prevailing things that they would tell us is there are not enough counselors. There are not enough counselors at the schools. There are not enough counselors in private practice. We just don't have enough mental health professionals. That goes for psychologists. It goes for the people who could prescribe the medicines that are necessary, et cetera, et cetera. Just aren't the resources out there right now in mental health. So with that being the case, kind of in a society-wide issue, how on the local level does the church help to address the growing mental health issues that we have locally? How does a local parish, a local diocese, what do we do to help address that need? And if we could have some kind of better, deeper impact, what are the spiritual ramifications of that?
Yeah, so for me, at the end of the day, like when I serve mental health needs, I think the spiritual ramifications are sort of a bringing about the kingdom, because if I'm addressing mental health needs, then this person is bringing themselves more fully to the life of the community, the life of the church. And so this is kind of helping to bring about the kingdom. They're able to make a more sincere gift of themselves in the community. And I know this in just my own experience of healing, how in the course of formation, I was able to grow in disinterested, sincere gift of self, like we learn from the theology of the body. I think this is what we move towards when we strive for mental, greater levels of mental health, to be setting people free to make a greater disinterested gift of themselves to the body. So I think this is the spiritual kind of, return on investment that parishes can have, is members more and more free and able to show up to the community. But at the local level, I think sometimes there's some low hanging fruit that we can have just by forming groups for people. And there's curriculums that are available that a group leader, you don't have to be a mental health professional, but you can read through a book and follow the curriculum, and that can get you some of those gains. If you don't have clinicians available to you, there are not enough. Here in East Texas, they did their needs assessment 2 years ago. The major hospital that's here, it's our hospital, Christus Mother Francis, and every 3 years they do a needs assessment of the community for the greatest health needs, and mental health, access to mental health care was number one. In the entire East Texas community, and then stating that there's not enough clinicians, it's not accessible enough for people at all income levels. And so that's a problem. Having enough clinicians, having enough prescribers is a problem. Having to wait 6 to 9 months to get into a prescriber is a real problem. Sometimes there are other prescribers. So if you can get into the care of a counselor, right? Sometimes it doesn't have to be a psychiatrist to prescribe, depending on the severity, right? So a primary care physician can prescribe mental health medications in partnership with a licensed counselor who's not a prescriber. They can maybe work together. Those are things that can happen as well. Another thing that I think we need to start to open ourselves up to is teletherapy, which I was so opposed to before the pandemic. If someone was will you do teletherapy? I was no, nothing. I would have nothing to do with it. My assumption was that it would be ineffective, impersonal. I want to be in the room with the person. I actually had some really wonderful progress via teletherapy. And it's hard for me to admit, because I would have loved to have been right, but I was wrong. And it can be an effective way to receive therapy. And with some age groups, I had more effective sessions than in person, I have to admit. So for parishes, I would say don't take 0 steps because you don't have the qualifications to take 20 steps. So you can form groups like grief groups or groups of women who've survived trauma, right? And keep it at a level of, we're reading a book, we're like sharing about what we reflect on from the book. You would not want to admit people to those groups who are still in like a dangerous situation. You want to be careful about that. Like if someone's still in a situation of abuse, they're not going to be a good fit for a group of women who have survived abuse.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mix that up. But I think sometimes parishes underestimate the mental health benefit of community, of just having community.
Yeah.
So that's the main thing I would encourage parishes to do, is topic-specific groups.
Okay.
So for people experiencing divorce or people surviving addictions, like making AA groups and SA groups and NA groups available at the parish. I don't see a lot of this at the parish level. I don't see a lot of those types of things at the parish level. And groups for women who are experiencing infertility. My goodness, this at a parish level, because that can be a very isolating experience for women. So encourage people you're encountering to consider teletherapy, and this will open up the number of clinicians available to them within the state. And B, don't hesitate at your pastoral parish level to form groups for these people, especially if you're following a curriculum, or using a book that's got some structure to it. Don't hesitate, and then what I think a lot of clinicians would be willing to do is, like, if you have a situation that comes up that feels beyond you, to maybe be on call for that.
Yeah.
So like, I'm not taking these people as my clients. I'm not coming and running your group for you, but I can be on call if it goes to a level that feels like beyond pastoral care.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. That's great. Thank you for that. Now, I want to throw a hand grenade into the room because this is how I operate. So this is an outside observation from a bald guy. Okay. So it seems to me that in 21st century United States, we can't talk to each other right now, especially when it comes to deeply held beliefs, right? And I'm going to give some examples because I want to talk about this in context. Let's talk, okay, Catholic and non-Catholic secular person. Catholic over here is saying you could take abortion, same-sex marriage, transgender issues, and then you've got a completely different understanding of the world and sexuality and humanity and love over here, right? From this secular person who's not Catholic. This person thinks this person's crazy. This person thinks this person's crazy. And they're unable to talk. They might even be family, formerly friend. And we're having difficulty talking. Or it's politics. I love Trump. I love Biden. Okay, we can't talk anymore. Could be guns. Could be racism right now, right? Where, you're a Black woman and I'm a white guy, right? We're not supposed to be able to talk about racism, right? I mean,
it's hard, you better not say one word.
Well, see, this is the thing. This is the thing, right? It's that because I'm a white guy, and some issues, like, okay, he can't even speak to that thing or have his own opinion. Whereas, it's all these kind of preconceived things. It's about, well, you're different. I can't listen to that. And one of the things I try to teach people about evangelization and just being a decent human being is that you can understand somebody where they're coming from without accepting their viewpoint, right? You can understand, and you can have compassion for, you can even try to conceptualize where they're coming from and those things without having to accept their deeply held belief, which means, in my opinion, that's the more loving way to go forward, right? I don't have to accept everything somebody else believes. Now, do you agree this is a problem? I don't want to, give you the answer there. And why do you think that's the case? Why do you think we're having such a difficult time talking to each other and listening to each other and just having some compassion and understanding for each other?
Yeah, when I read, because you had sent me that question, when I read it, there was something that popped immediately into my mind, and it was a gift to me because I had never thought of it before until that moment. And so I have it. I can screen share it if it's helpful to your audience.
Okay, here, I'm gonna let you
the screen share.
I have the screen. Hold on just a second. I'm gonna give it to you.
And so I'll share that in a second, but I'll start with a story. So recently this new ministry launched, and I saw it via social media on a couple platforms. And in the ministry description, the people who were launching this new ministry, they explained why. And it was a ministry that had to do with culture and race and experience of the church and things like that. As a counselor, one of the things we're trained to do is never take for granted that my definition or understanding of a word is my client's.
Oh, yeah.
So they train us to say, especially if a client is using a word over and over, they train us to say, tell me about what that word is, and to listen and to set aside for the moment all that has happened in my life to shape my understanding of that word,
Yeah.
so that I could hear this client to move them along to the next place they'd like to be. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, I had a client, this can be life or death, this type of listening.
Mm.
I had a client come in once. I try to be so careful with using
Yeah.
cases,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
who had a very serious experience the day before. By the grace of God, this person had a session early morning. This is a very serious, life serious experience. And
Mm-hmm.
my client kept using the word weird. And it
Mm.
took me, I still feel regret because it took me maybe 8 or 9 times before that training clicked in my mind. And I said, describe weird. And my client was dissociated, was completely dissociated. And so was having a pretty severe
Yeah.
trauma reaction to the experience. And so we had to stop everything we were doing and attend to that dissociation.
Mm.
And that person's way of trying to tell me how they felt was the word weird.
Weird. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was life, and that was safety, and that was, and so that I've used that example to help us understand that it's so important that we pause and try to understand what's even being said to me with a word. So
Mm-hmm.
when that ministry released the other day, it had maybe like 7 or 8 words in the description that as a counselor, I could spend like 2 or 3 sessions on those words.
Yeah.
Like, what like, what do you mean by that? What's your hit? Like, I could really, we don't pause like that with in conversations,
Uh-huh.
to say, what is it that mean for you? This is something that we learned in school, and it's like the culture iceberg.
Okay.
So when I talk about Latino culture, we automatically will maybe see flags from Mexico, South America, Central America, think of
Mm-hmm.
festivals, language, food, music that comes
Yeah.
with that. That is just the surface.
Right.
And the deeper it gets down here, the less aware I am personally of it in myself.
Yeah.
So like deep culture are things I just do and don't even necessarily, as I play this out, like I'm not even aware that it's a deep sense of culture that's driving how I'm approaching this. And that includes religion, courtship, marriage, how people raise kids, decision making, problem solving. Just above that, sin, the concept of sin, death, cooperation versus competition, right? Expectations, work, authority, how we treat the elderly and children, ideas about sex, use of time, family, justice, what's beauty, right? What does friendship, leadership look like? And then just above, like facial expressions, gestures, whether I'm making eye contact or not. I share that because I think sometimes I'm not even present to my own experience of deep culture, let alone another person's that I'm in a conversation with. And like I can be in a family with someone, and especially because of the way culture gets shaped now, because we have so many broad influences with the introduction of mainstream media, I can be in the same family with a person and our culture have evolved in different directions. And so be having experiences of deep-seated culture differently, but not even realizing that what's occurring there. And so I guess that's would be my answer for that. I just don't know that we know how to slow down. But I would say that I tell this to my clients. So like pay attention first. And I teach this to the kids too, that I'm more quick to be aware of what's happening in my body sometimes than in my mind. So if my face is hot and my hands are getting clammy and my heart rate is picking up, I need to shut up. I need to shut up. And I need to stop typing.
Yeah, don't get on social media.
Because if my hands are clammy and my face is hot and my heartbeat's rushing, my survival mode is kicked in, and I'm about to do things that I would not do otherwise, and say things I would not say otherwise. And so, to your question, like, why can't we have these conversations? I think it's because it's deeper in the iceberg than we realize. We don't have the skills to explore one another's even meanings. Like, tell me what you mean by that word. Tell me your experience of that word. And then we don't have the self-discipline to slow down and to stop talking and to stop typing because that stuff that's held down deep, we're going to protect it. Like, we're going to protect it. It means a lot to us. And it's core to who we are. And so we will fight you over it. and so to learn to like slow down. But I feel like that's asking a lot.
Yeah, it's difficult, right? It's easier said than done, but it's a skill we need to learn, right? We need to help other people do it, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate all your wisdom today, and for your time too, sister.
You're
And
welcome.
where, if people wanted to learn more about you and or your ministry, your order, where could they go?
Our order is Nazareth, csfn.org. So the word Nazareth, like the city where Jesus lived, and then C like cat, S like Sam, F like Frank, and like Nancy.org.
Well, thank you, and God bless.